A very warm welcome to the High Performance Human podcast. It's your man, Andy, here, and I am absolutely delighted to be joined all the way from Papua New Guinea is Jacqui Barnes, who is the head of people and growth at the Laing Simmons Group, which is a real estate organization in New South Wales. Now, Jacqui is someone that I've been quite keen on getting on board to the podcast because people that are in Jacqui's sort of position, their job essentially is to try and identify high performers. And so it's really, really good for us. We've been doing a lot of work on the internal, a lot of conversations around with some of our guests around what we need to do internally to be high performers. But it's always great to get those subjective opinions from people in the know. Now, Jacqui, I have crossed paths with previously in a professional sense, with respect to Real Estate Institute New South Wales conversations and the likes of that. But one thing that has definitely struck me about Jacqui is the clarity with which she goes about her work is quite fantastic, actually. And it's something that I've not mentioned to her before now, but I've definitely been impressed by the way in which she has an absolute North Star with what she does, how she does it, and why she does it. And I think that in itself is a lesson that we will all take down in our notes over the course of today's episode. Jacqui Barnes, it's a very warm welcome to you. How the heck are you doing?
I'm great. I think I need to take you with me every day to introduce me to everyone I come across. That's a pretty good welcome. I'm good.
Excellent stuff. Excellent. So just to put people into a bit of context, why are you in Papua New Guinea?
Well, I'm in Papua. Oh, technically, I do live here at the moment. My husband's in the Australian Defence Force. We've been posted here for 2 years. We're on the home stretch. We get back in a couple of months. Thankfully, the time over here is nearly done. So I've been flying back and forth between here and Sydney since January 2023. So, and I always seem to shock people when they scratch their head and go, "What? You really live there?" I really do.
Well, look, I mean, I think the one question I want to ask about it is it's obviously it's a tremendous responsibility being a part of the army, the Australian Defence Force and whatnot.
Mhm.
Um, it's also a tremendous responsibility for those supporting those in the ADF.
Yeah,
And and
yeah.
and knowing what I know of you, I know you're a family person, but you're also a career person as well. So how like has the journey I'm sort of asking openly, is there must have been a couple of bumps in the road for you personally, right? With respect to managing the support that you need to provide, like being a support person, i.e
Yeah.
moving to Papua New Guinea, or have you
You know
found
what?
it okay?
It's a really interesting question. So Papua New Guinea itself, a lot of people assume that we're in Port Moresby, which is the capital city here, and we're not. We're in Lae, which is more like a regional. They would call it a regional hub. This is where more of like the shipping and everything happens. But it also means that we're in what is really a almost like an outback country town in terms of services. So we don't have access to medical facilities. I can't even buy cheese and wine and dips and stuff in the supermarket. That's it, all fresh milk, it's all long life milk, things like that. So we are very remote where we are, but it's also an amazing community. And whilst I won't necessarily miss living here, I will absolutely miss the friends that we've made and the community that we've made. I mean, we're out every Friday, Saturday night. Everyone's when there's nothing to do, it's amazing how sociable it can be here.
Mm.
Um, and look, the last 2 years has not been without its challenges. And I wish that I could tell you that I was super mum, super wife, super career woman. But I'm not. And I don't believe it's really possible for
Mm.
anyone to be all of those things and not be on the brink of a nervous breakdown at any given time. I think you can be one of those things. I think you can sometimes be two of those things, but I don't think you can be all of those things all at the one time. So, if I'm being completely honest about it, probably something is always suffering, in the sense of, maybe I haven't given the kids enough attention one day because I'm flat out trying to, get a project off the ground at work or delivered or something like that. And, it's real estate life, right? It's no different for me, as it is for any other agent that's on the ground. You're always on the phone and things like that. And, if you ask my kids who are 5, almost 6 and 8, what I do, they'll tell you that my job is to talk on the phone. So, they definitely see it. I am lucky that I have help in terms of cleaner and all of that sort of jazz. And my husband and I, we have to put in effort. It is a conscious effort to make sure we do remember to prioritize us when things are busy at work and in life and things like that. But I'm also really lucky. I've got an incredibly supportive husband that's proud of me and my career and all that sort of stuff. And I don't know, sometimes people ask me, how do I do it all? The honest answer is I don't know. I just do, because what's the alternative? Collapse in a heap on the ground? It doesn't. I wish I could actually have an answer for it, but I don't. And I think it's probably being aware that you can't be everything all at once, all at the same time, and you can just only do your best. And I think if you're trying to do your best every day, then hopefully that's enough.
Yeah, it's something. It's a topic of conversation that's come up a little bit because a number of people that listening to the show, they have various versions of whether it's mum guilt, or they have some sort of apprehension for really trying to live out the ambitions that they have inside because they feel that they're being selfish, for want of a better word, and it really is becoming apparent that one of the huge barriers to entry for people who want to upgrade their existence in some way, shape, or form is the fact that they just don't want to be selfish, right? And it's not selfish, it's self-protection, self-care. But
Yeah.
in their minds, it's selfish, right? So and that's why I wanted to ask that question, because upping and moving your family to Papua New Guinea in order to support your husband in his career. I mean, I know that the army and the ADF, the Defence Force, from a career standpoint, it is sort of a slightly different mentality because it is a commitment as opposed, you know what I mean? So I know that there is nuanced differences with regards to that, but even so, I mean, there surely would be parts of you at various stages where you're like, fuck this. Like, I want to do me.
I laugh at this because I had that this morning.
Right.
Because I was trying to, I'm due to fly back on the weekend, and I've been trying to book my flights for about 3 days and the website's down.
Right.
And so I'm on the phone, and then, the website's telling me this morning that my bank won't process the card because of the security reasons. So I'm on the phone to the bank trying to get the card to work because, overseas thinks it's a scam. Yeah. And so in the end, I just about lost my mind because it turns out that the system's down here, and I had to go down to the sales office, and I rang my husband in tears and told him how shit it was, and that I've had enough. And it's funny because it's the dumbest stuff that tips you over the edge. A website not working, like, we'll talk about a first world problem, right? Like, seriously, there's much bigger problems in the world than a website not working. But that's what tipped me over the edge today. But, in fairness, I haven't had a lot of those. And I'm also back and forth to Australia a lot. I'm back every few weeks, and I'm lucky that my kids have been resilient enough to that. And I'm lucky that I have my parents in Sydney, so I've got a home base that I'm set up at. The times that I bring the kids with me during school holidays and things, they're awesome. They just sort of drop everything and help me so that I can still work and the kids get their grandparent time and stuff like that. But also too, with being here, my husband also recognises, and I think most defence members recognise the sacrifices that their spouse has to make for the defence career. And he does recognise that, and he does what he can to make sure that I'm supported. If he's got to pick the kids up from school, or go and do things or work from home because I've got meetings and things like that, then he just does it, and we just figure it out. But I think there's so many. It's just the way of the world now, right? Like, there's so many couples that just have to figure it out. But I do have to acknowledge that I've got the most amazing group of people that I work with. My CEO Leanne is just nothing's ever, she's so solution focused, and she's been great. If it wasn't for her being, I guess, so open-minded about me being able to do this, and go back and forth, it wouldn't be possible.
Mm.
So, and the team have also been awesome. When we've got events and things, whilst it's not necessarily built around me, they certainly do take my availability into consideration and try and structure things so that it works for everybody.
Mm.
And it's just, I just think, we've both been committed, both Laing Simmons and my husband and I have been committed to what I need to do in my career. I don't get funding for my travel back and forth. I pay for that. And I do that because I made a commitment, and I said that I would be somewhere at this particular interval on these particular dates, and I'll never not show up. And I wear that cost because I love my job and the people I work with and the company. So I think I think when people are committed enough, it doesn't feel so much like, it's kind of a bit like, no, if you love what you do, it's not work. Yes, it is work. It's my job, but I do really enjoy. And I do love what I do, which is why I think that I've also been able to do it with, probably relative ease. Yes, there are a couple of challenges. It's a local airline in a third world country that never runs on time. Is that a challenge? Yes, but you just figure it out and you roll with it. So we get there.
And it really does highlight the fact that high performance is a really interdependent thing. Right? You can't do it by yourself. Like, you really can't. No. We talk about all the things that we need to do, but ultimately, one of the most critical things that we need to have is an interdependent network whereby, you are greater as a collective as opposed to the sum of the individual parts, right?
Yes.
It really does highlight that tremendously, both with your husband, who sounds like a top lad, Leanne and the crew at Laing Simmons, but also your kids, right? Because I'm sure there'll be times where they're a bit pissed off with being in Papua New Guinea, being away from the mates and all that sort of stuff, right? So the fact that your kids are very much a part of that interdependent network, and I'm sure that that you guys will be making them very aware that they'll be actually playing a much better role than what they realize, right? Or without thinking it. So very, very good. It's interesting, very interesting dynamic. Now, I want to get into the nuts and bolts, though, because I want to pick your brain as someone that has spent most or a lot of her career identifying talent, identifying high performers and whatnot. I really want to dig into that perspective. But before we crack on, we always have this tradition where we always ask all of our guests what their definition of a high performance human is. So for me, I think there are 4 elements to it, being success, connection, influence, and happiness, and they're all a bit of an ecosystem where one doesn't survive without the other. What's your version of a high performance human? Because you'll have different influences when I'm thinking about it. When you think about your exposure to the forces, but coming from a corporate background and white collar work and whatnot as well. So what's your version of a high performance human?
So it's interesting because I feel like that is also subjective to the person that's looking at it, and so for example, I think a high performance human, I think in the real estate sense, people automatically shift to what does the $1 million agent do? And I don't think it's necessarily that. I think a high performer is somebody that has absolute clarity about what it is that they're doing. They are committed to the outcome. They've got a strong work ethic, great communication. I think there's somebody that is solution focused and can deliver on what it is that they've said they're going to do. They follow through. And I just think that generally speaking, I don't know, maybe it's a bit of a cliche, but I just think that they've got to be a decent human being to be that whole. I just feel like that piece has to come into it, because otherwise, fine, you might be good at doing some numbers, but if you're burning people on the way through, are you really a high performer, or are you somebody that just lights a fire and has had a bit of luck on your side?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and it's a fair comment. I mean, we try and dance our way around cliches on this podcast, but invariably we actually stumble, we actually crack
Oh,
into them every now and then. Of course, we have to.
yeah.
And the whole decent human being thing is actually something, oddly, it's actually something that not many people on this show have actually said or highlighted, right? They may have mentioned it in passing, but not many of them have talked about the need to be good for your fellow human, to be right,
Yeah.
be right by your fellow human. And um, it sort of pushes to that sort of whole narrative of what's the point of having abundance if you've got no one to share it with? Um, uh, you know,
Yeah, it's funny. My husband and I, we have an argument on money can't buy happiness.
mm,
I'm a big believer that money can't buy happiness. He absolutely disagrees and tells me walk into Louis Vuitton tomorrow with a a gold credit card and tell me you're not happy when you walk out. You know, it's material things, right? But what am I going to do? Take a Louis Vuitton to the nursing home and have it look after me and keep me company? Actually, maybe I would love that. I don't know, but it's not like it's material possessions, right? But look, you know what? Does money make life a bit easier and remove a bit of stress? Yes. Do I think it actually makes people happy and bring them joy? Probably not. Not in the true sense.
yeah, I think it probably. See. I've had this internal. I've had this battle internally, and a lot of my decisions have been more happiness driven as opposed to financially driven. And
Yes.
I know for a fact that I could be a lot richer than what I currently am, and if I made some different decisions, but the thing, I don't know whether it's an old man thing now that I'm into my fifth decade and whatnot. Now I'm in my 40s, I don't know whether it is a maturation, maybe, I'm not sure, but um, money, it doesn't make the world go round, but it does give you choice, right? And so
Agree.
and
I agree.
it's
Yeah.
almost like you can, I think the happy medium in terms of an answer to that whole question could be, no, it doesn't buy you happiness, but it opens the door if you want to walk through. Um,
Yes, I do with that. Gives you choices.
yeah, I think we need to, and I think we all need to be a little bit more comfortable around the making of money. It's okay to make money, as long as you're being a decent human being while you're doing it, right?
Yeah, I just think, I think the world has changed, I understand that, like people talk about, real estate agents, whether you're a transactional agent or whether you're a service-based agent.
Mm,
And I just think that, in my opinion, whilst there are certain marketplaces, while a transactional agent is still probably, what that particular marketplace demands, I just think that particularly since COVID, I just don't think people want that transaction service anymore.
mm,
I mean, I get it when you go to Coles and you don't want to talk to anybody and you want to do your own self checkout and all that sort of stuff. But I think when you're talking about these major life events of transacting property, paying tens of thousands of dollars for somebody to handle that transaction for you, I think that people demand service, and I think I think it should be a minimum expectation on
mm.
is that service. And service is different things to different people, but I just think that it comes a time where I think that service and providing value, and I don't mean value in terms of saving, but being a valuable person or valuable conduit or whatever it might be throughout that process is what's so important now. And I
Mm.
think the world has changed since COVID, and I think that will shift more and more.
I think a part of that, it's a good point, and I think a part of that is the fact that, and there's umpteen amounts of studies and data that supports this.
Mm.
Since we've been affected by the pandemic, and actually the generation that's been most affected by the pandemic, the alphas and the Gen
Yeah.
Z's coming through, and that have really been affected, the Gen Z's in particular, um, it's forced them to become way more acutely aware, like way more consciously aware of their feelings and emotions and so on and so forth.
Yes.
If through nothing else, the fact that they've just been sat staring at four walls for prolonged periods of time, right? It sort of forces you
Yes.
to reflect a little bit once you've eaten like half the pantry. So which we all did. So I think you're right, because the effect and the attention, or the percentage of attention that's being paid to the emotional states of human beings these days, right? And
Yeah.
I think as a result of that, it's really interesting, because you see it. You mentioned Coles, or the supermarket. Sorry, we're not sponsored by Coles. You mentioned the supermarket, right? But um, I get a little bit agitated by it when it comes to restaurants. So on
Yeah.
a recent trip back over to the UK, and I actually mentioned this in an article recently. I was in Camden Market, and there was a crumble store, the dessert, so an apple crumble or
Yep.
whatever. And it smelled like phenomenal. So I was like, nah, I'm doing it. I'm being fat all trip. Who cares? And I went in there, and I'm asking the guys a couple of questions, a couple of people behind the counter, and it's the simplest menu on the planet, right? It's three types of crumble, it's two types of sauce. That's all you've got pretty much, right? And
Yep.
I was like, this is great, because I hate it. I hate choice. Like, for me, having like more than one car park fries my brain. And I went and I stood there, and I asked them a couple of questions, and they answered them. And then they stood there looking at me, and I'm looking at them, and I've got my money in my hand. I'm trying to like almost get their hand to put my money into their hand. And they went, no, 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 no. And they just start doing that, and they start pointing down. I look down, and there's an iPad there. Like, there's these guys that are waiting for orders and a bench, but they're insisting that I use an iPad in order to make my order.
Oh,
And yeah, and I'm like, I mean, I'm aware. I'm more value based around the human connection piece and all that sort of stuff anyway. So that's gonna get on my tits naturally. But from a human connection point of view, not only did it make me think that, oh well, as long that's all it's done is remind me that I really like apple crumble. It's not really wanting me to go back to that shop. It's just reminding me that I want
yeah.
apple crumble, right? Um, but the real sort of stark reality is the fact that um society has gone on this technology exponential like boom, and yet there's a disconnect between how we're running society and the desperate needs of society right now.
It's interesting, actually. So, what I would say though about somebody, when you ask about a definition of a high performer, in that situation, it's about understanding. So, there might have been a customer in there before you that didn't even want to speak to that person behind the counter. They just wanted to put their order into the iPad and be done with it. You wanted a little bit of interaction, and the next person that comes after you might want them to take the full order as if they were in more of a restaurant style sitting down.
Mm,
But from a performance perspective, if you look at the real estate industry, that person behind the counter and their ability to be able to read what that consumer, those three different types of consumers,
mm,
and how they want it serviced, I think is what's significant in that. Because there will be some people that only want to enter that into the iPad. But why would you want to go and touch somebody else's iPad that 50 people before you? Might as well make it an app on your phone.
mm,
Order it on your way in. And
mm.
then you don't have to wait. Like, if you're going to do it, go all the way and do it properly,
Yeah.
or adapt to what it is. And I think that I think so many people are. I think technology is important. I think AI is important, and I definitely think that the way the world is going, there's going to be more and more of it. Do I think it's going to ever replace the need for delivering service? No. But do I think that the person or the business that utilizes those tools along with service, they will go further?
Mm.
Those two things together will go much further than the people that don't embrace it, or the people that only use the technology and then don't deliver a service.
And I think that in business land, or just in life generally, I think that you're spot on. And I think that we've become so obsessed with bringing all this stuff into our games, that it's sort of swayed so far one way that the pendulum's going to need
Yeah.
to swing back at some point to provide a balanced approach, right? Because
It's, yeah. Agree. And I can't actually, it might even an article that you wrote, I read in recent days. I can't remember if it was your one or not, but I feel like there would be business owners out there that have got, we all go to conferences and we get all of, all different things. And I actually had it described to me in a very interesting way recently. They called it squirrels. There's always squirrels at a conference or a convention or an ARIC or whatever. And so you go there and you see about this new fandangle product that's going to save you so much time or whatever. And it's a little squirrel you take back to the office and you chase around and it gets your attention. And I thought it was a very interesting way to describe it. And so, I think that there are people who invest a lot of money into technology, systems, tools, all of that sort of stuff. But I don't think any of them are actually used to their full potential. And I think that business owners, probably in many industries, not just real estate, if they act, I would challenge them all to go into an actual audit of what it is that they're spending, because I bet there's money in there that they are spending at the moment on tools that are not even being used or they don't even know the login for. And it's almost like there's too much.
Yeah.
This tool over here might be great, but really it would be better if it speaks to this tool. And, I don't know. I just think that it should be something that is a tool in the toolbox rather than the toolbox itself.
100%. Let alone the person carrying said toolbox. Now,
exactly.
Now, I really want to dig into your experience with respect to what you've been doing professionally, which is essentially identifying high performers, right? And I think that this is a really important conversation for us that we need to have on this show, because there'll be a lot of people that could be perfectly capable of becoming a high performer. But a lot of the challenge for them is the fact that they don't feel that they are exuding that confidence in being a high performer based on the standard narrative that gets pushed around social media or businesses or whatever, right? You kind of alluded to it a little bit when you mentioned that everybody, whenever you think about high performance in real estate, you instantly take into GCC. It's a gross commission. But I would love to get your opinion on how Jacqui goes around even contemplating someone being a high performer or having the ingredients to become one.
Yeah, it's interesting. I suppose one of the questions I probably ask myself is, would I list my house with them? If they were in my living room as an agent, would I? And I had 4 agents booked in to come and see me, and they were number 1 through the door. Would I cancel the remaining 3 agents and sign with them that day? It's probably a bit of a kind of like, I guess, my version of the pub test, really.
Now, let me just stop you there. You talk about the pub test, right? So let's no, it's legit. But we need to dig into that a little bit, because again, so many people that listen to this podcast, and people, I'm sure I've got plenty in my network. I'm sure you've got plenty in your network, where Jacqui just mentioned the pub test there, gang, and what she's essentially alluding to is you go into a pub or a bar or a restaurant or a public place. And it's the ability to be able to feel comfortable around a human being in terms of having a conversation and feeling centered and safe and secure and on all those sorts of wonderful emotions, right? So on that, though, you mentioned about, would I list my property with them? For you, as a mom, wife, professional, all the different hats that you've got on, what are the critical lights that need to turn on in you when it comes to that decision?
So interesting. It's an interesting question, because I'm, when I ask myself that question, would I list with them? This is not a discussion where they've pitched their business or their marketing strategy or their brand or any of those particular things, right? But they've sat in front of me and they've come in, and all I can see is essentially their personal brand. So I've spoken to them on the phone, an appointment with them, and then we've jumped online together or met for a coffee or whatever. And so a couple of things that people, a few things that they all will have in common generally are personal presentation. And I'm not saying that supermodels and all of that sort of stuff, just they are neatly presented, clean, neat, groomed hair. They don't have ratty shoes on or an untied. They don't look sloppy. They look sharply presented.
Yeah.
And I know what I've noticed with that is that everybody that has that type of their demeanor is different. They carry themselves with an air of confidence. It's not an air of arrogance. It's an air of confidence that I know who I am. I know what I can bring to the world. I know what it is that I'm talking about, not in a cocky, arrogant, ego way, but just in a, hey, I've got something to share with you. And I think that, sit down and listen. And so, sorry, go.
No, it's a fucking gold point, that, right? I mean, and I just need to highlight that. Team, this is one for your notes, 100%. Notice how Jacqui actually made sure that we were aware that she wasn't talking about being like Zoolander, really, really good looking and all that sort of stuff, tits and tan and all the rest of it. What she said there was that you have a degree of personal care, right? Now, Guy Ritchie, I listened to a Guy Ritchie interview, the director, and I've mentioned this on the podcast previously, and he was on a podcast with Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan asked him about why he always wears a suit, right? And Guy Ritchie goes, well, my suit's my armor. And he goes, I know that it's not about the suit. It's not about the flash. It's about the fact that I know when I put a suit on, I'm ready and I'm in game mode. And it essentially calibrates, his suit calibrates his brain into being in the right space in order to be the best version of him. Now, if you're listening to this and you're like, well, bollocks to that, I don't like wearing suits, or ties aren't for me. And this is a stupid conversation that always gets put around, especially in service-based industries, right? It really is. But when you think about it, it's just silly, because I think the real point that Jacqui made wonderfully there is the fact that if how you look brings out a level of confidence in you, you need to be purposeful in how you look.
Yeah.
And as long as you are purposeful in the fact that you have taken the time and the care to own how you look, and you're not just a scruffy bastard, it doesn't necessarily matter that you've not got a gold tie pin on, or that you've not got the Louis Vuitton heels or whatever, right?
Tie, no tie. There's no rule book. I mean, it's 2024, right? There's plenty of guys that only wear a polo shirt to work these days. And that's fine. Make sure it's neat, ironed, not stained. If you're wearing a white shirt, make sure it's properly white and it's not turned grey in the wash. Like, it's just the smallest stuff. And the thing is, it does seem superficial and all of that. I understand how it can come across that way, but people notice this stuff. And what's funny is you don't realize how much, you might think that you don't notice it as the person wearing it, but you do, because it affects how you carry yourself.
100%.
And how you carry yourself. If you walk into a meeting, a conversation, whatever it is, where you're trying to pitch for something, and you sit there and you're nervous and you're stumbling over your words and you're not sure what to do next, anything that's going to help you, as you said, like Guy Ritchie said, put on your armor, whatever that is. Don't have a cigarette in the car before you're about to walk into a meeting. Even if you're going in to see a pack-a-day smoker, all of this type of stuff, it's small things, but they're things that I notice that people that are at that performance level, they do present themselves and carry themselves in a particular way. And, it might not be something that comes naturally to you. And that doesn't mean you have to go shop at, the high-end boutiques. Buy it in Target. There's nothing that says you have to buy brand label anything. Buy something that makes you feel good, that means that when you're speaking to somebody, you're carrying yourself with that air of confidence, because it comes out.
It really
comes
does.
Out in the way you communicate.
And it's
So
working, and it's just operating with purpose. And it's
yeah,
purposeful in everything that you do. And whether we like it or not, gang, and you can say that this is bullshit, but it's not. Um, Ultimately, if someone doesn't know you and you're wanting to be a person of influence to that person, then what else have they got to make that judgment on other than what they see in front of them or what they smell or what they what I mean? Like ultimately we judge with all of our senses, whether we like it or
yeah,
whether it's subconsciously or not, or consciously, we become aware of these things. And if someone, or if you're looking to reach a higher level of performance, then you need to start with yourself. I mean, yourself is like, how do I carry myself? How do I wear? What do I wear? This? What do I wear?
yeah,
That? I actually had a bit of a personal issue with this at one point, right? Because I was seeing just flash on stages and whatnot, and I'm thinking, nah, that's not me. That's not me at all. So I was thinking, right, well, I'm going to wear white trainers and jeans and a shirt and what have you, and that's going to be me, right? But then that was me trying to be different for the sake of being different when it wasn't making me feel purposeful in what I was doing.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's only been since I've embraced the British in me, and I'm like, I am British, right? I'm gonna start. I need to own that, and I've kind of gone
yeah.
down the Guy Ritchie path a little bit with how I go about, my attire and whatnot. I'm not the flashiest guy in the world by a long stretch, but I know when I need to be on. I have my armor and it's a purposeful kit, right? And so, so you guys, if you're looking to if you're looking to be a high performer or make some changes, you've got to make some of those changes for yourself and do it all with purpose.
I think you know what? It's if you walked into a property that and you were signing up the agency agreement, you've got the listing, and it's an absolute dump. There's crap everywhere. Are you not going to tell your vendor, you know what, guys, to get the maximum price and show the property in its best possible light? Let's get a cleaner to come in. Why don't we get a painter? Why don't we do this? If you're going to tell your vendors to present their home in a particular way, you've got to do it with you too.
100%. And that's the same in
It's,
any industry, any walk of life.
yeah,
If you're going on a date, what do you want if you're going on a first date, what do you want the person opposite you to think of you?
exactly. Yeah,
It's if you want them to think that you don't really care about much because you don't care about yourself, then go ahead and wear
yeah,
the slightly tatty t-shirt that's got a stain on the bottom from last night's takeaway or whatever, right? Because that is
mm,
ultimately the communication that you are providing to whoever it is that you're communicating with. It's
yeah.
really critical, that thing. Now, what else? Like in terms of the army wife in you just came out then a little bit, I think, as well. And again, I had the similar. I had a similar influence from my old man. Like I'm one of the best ironers in Australia, I swear, but purely because of my old man. I don't let anybody iron my stuff.
So they learn this at basic training, how to iron. So I don't do it. I mean, I own my own clothes, but and I'd probably murder my husband if he tried to iron mine because he wouldn't do it the way I liked it. But equally so, yes, I have had to have a lesson in the uniforms, but that's the dry cleaners problem these days. I don't have to do it.
Now, back on point before we start getting into the pros and cons of ironing. My fault. So tell me, what else is it that you look for in humans? So if you're looking to try and identify talent that you want to if that you want to collaborate with, irrespective of whether you're a consumer or whether you're a Jacqui
Yeah.
Barnes, the head of humans.
So we're looking when I know what I notice about people is a level of self-awareness. So
Mm,
I'll often ask people, if you were to join us, what could we do to help you be better? You're writing 500,000 at the moment. What can we do to support you to write 750 or whatever the next bracket up is that they're wanting to do?
mm,
And more often than not, those that are performers will have a level of self-awareness on what's lacking and what they need to do to improve. Maybe it's just their level of commitment. And you know what? Haven't been great on the prospecting lately. I just need to be more disciplined. Great. That shows me that you know. And if you've got that level of self-awareness, we can work with that
right.
because we can help you develop that discipline or help you get on track. And if you're not going to do it and you don't want to, I've got a business owner that will sit here and tell me, you know what, I know exactly what I need to do. I know exactly how many people I need to talk to a day. But you know what, I just don't want to do the cold calling. So I'm prepared to pay for it. I'll outsource it. Fine. If you're not prepared to do it, we'll figure out how to outsource it. And so it's that level of awareness. And, you know, they could sit there and tell me, you know what, oh, yeah, I'll do it. But they own it. It's not what I want to do. I'd rather be spending my time at these appointments, so I'll outsource it. And it's fine. It's having that self-awareness. Genuine care is another one.
How do you find how do you identify the real from the bullshit though with that? Because there's a lot of like care in inverted commas, right?
Do you know what? I don't actually even know how to articulate it properly. Maybe I've just got a bullshit radar. I don't know. I've been doing this a long time, so I can tell when something's off. And usually I can tell from the point of going through a resume. Because if something doesn't stack up, or I'll ask, you know, are you still on good terms with this office or this or that, or the way you might ask a question, I can tell by the answer, the way, the hesitation before, you know, the pause, you know, whether or not there's a slight adjustment in the way they sit, you know, I don't even know if it's the way it's answered, or it's not even what's said. It's maybe more what not said. But I can just tell.
And that in itself is an interesting one, right? So you guys listening, you may have heard of variations of a theme of bullshit radar, right? Where you just know if something's off. There's something not quite right with the aura of a person, or the spidey senses are tingling around a certain person for whatever reason, and you can't quite. And a lot of the time, when you have a conversation about someone that has done that to you, sometimes you go, I can't quite put my finger on what it is.
Yeah,
it's not right. And you know, I think the point that really highlights, which again is important for your notes, is that we're communicating in more ways than what sometimes we even realize ourselves. It's kind of like a game of cards. It's kind of like a game of poker. You know, in poker, they talk about people having tells, right? Which is their subconscious telling the table whether they've got a good hand or a bad hand. And a lot of the time, those tells are either really, really subtle, or they are just instinctive reactions to getting some good news or bad news, or being challenged in an interview or not being challenged in an interview, right? And that's where this whole bullshit radar comes into play, because there's no set textbook on this, but we all communicate subconsciously as well as consciously. It's almost like in any interaction, there's always 2 or 3 conversations going on in various ways, whether it's a vibration conversation, an energy conversation, a verbal conversation, a body language conversation. There could be 4, 5, 6 different communications that are going on at any one time, but obviously we're only going to pay attention to the immediate one that's right in front of us, right? So it's something that, for your notes there, gang, that and it ties in with that self-awareness piece as well that you mentioned before. It ties in beautifully, because if you can just study yourself a little bit, right? And try and study yourself subjectively, in the sense of, now, how, you know, when I do this, how could it be perceived? How could it be taken on board as X, Y, and Z? It's really important that we ask ourselves these questions, right? Because if we're not prepared to ask them, then how can we expect anybody else to understand the message that we're trying to convey, when they are too busy trying to interpret all the different messages that we are actually putting across to them, right? We've got to take some responsibility around that, right?
Yeah, we do. It's interesting, you know, it's funny how it all works. There's a great book actually by a guy called Patrick Lencioni. It's called The Ideal Team Player. And I'm not a massive fan of business books. I struggle to read them. I think it's boring to me. But this particular book, it's written really well. It's actually written like a fiction story, but you can see the lesson as it's going through. And then at the end, it gets into more of the business style and how to apply what the learning is. But this ideal team player, it talks about 3 traits that that an ideal team player should have. But I would argue that they are also the same 3 traits that a high performer or any sales agent or real estate personnel, team member should have, which is they need to be hungry, they need to be humble, and they need to be smart. And hungry doesn't necessarily mean, that person that wants to be that $1 million writer, $2 million writer, whatever it is. It is the person that is passionate and committed to whatever it is that they're doing. That could be a receptionist. The humble is not so humble that you've got no confidence. Just enough of an ego that you know what you're doing. You can advocate for yourself. You're confident in what you're doing, but you're not arrogant. And smart is actually about emotional intelligence and being able to understand, have the social skills to read the room, understand when to talk, when not to talk, when to push further on something, when not to push further. And what they've got this diagram in the book, and it's where all those 3 circles intersect with one another. That little piece in the middle is where that ideal person sits. And I actually think that's true of a high performer as well. They've got the hunger, but they're not so ego driven that they're a problem, and they've got the social intelligence to read the room and understand the play, and obviously then take the lead from whatever it is that's next. I think that those some of those things that come out in interviews, yes, those things do come out, and they are things that we do look at, and understanding there's got to be an element of being able to articulate what it is they've done up until now. Why it's, whether it's somebody saying that, I speak to X amount of people a day, I've done X amount of deals, or I've done this, or I've done that, and just sort of sharing their results. But one of the big things I notice about high performers, and if you say to them let's say, for instance, they've said, when I worked at Joe Blow Real Estate, I didn't do as well there. Okay, how come? Tell me about that. No one will sit there and tell me, that principal, he was such a jerk. This is what happened. He did this, and this, or this person's fault, or this wasn't here, or that wasn't there. You know what? It just wasn't the right fit. I probably could have done better. We didn't gel. Maybe they could have done better. It wasn't the right fit. But they won't they won't try and blame other people. They're accountable for what it is that they've done. They're aware of what they could have done better. And sometimes it's not even that they could have done anything better. Sometimes we do fall into those situations where you've just ended up with a shitty employer. Yeah. But they are able to at least go, well, you know what did I learn when I worked there? Because even if you've worked in a terrible environment, there is always a learning. And I think those people that are performers, they learn at every single thing they do in their life. I think they're people with strong energy. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're coming in bouncing off the walls, but they've got a level of energy in there and pep in their step. If you get Debbie Downer coming in, dragging her feet to a listing appointment, are you going to sit there and give her the time of day? Probably not.
Yeah.
But, if Debbie comes in sprightly and full of life, you know what? You've got a much better shot at Debbie signing you up then. And I think that everybody that we have discovered are high performers are service oriented. They have client service. They've got those customer service skills, and they've got strong communication. And they're able to adapt their communication style to the person that they're dealing with. You'll get people. Leanne and I are very different communicators. She is so direct.
Yes.
And for my personality type or my communication style, if I didn't seek to understand what other communication styles were, I could probably find that abrupt. But because I understand what those communication styles are, I know that she's a busy woman and she's just trying to get me the information that I need to go and do the next thing I need to do, or make a decision about what I need to do. But equally, if I sat there and sent her an email that's 50 points long with lots of flowery crap in it, she's not going to read it. She's actually probably going to email me back and say, this is too long, I'm not reading it. And so, but understanding, so I understand that when I'm communicating with her, I need to keep it short and sharp and to the point. But equally, she knows there's times that she's got to write the flowers. And it's understanding that you've got to adapt to each other and find that middle point, right? And that's how communication works. And performers are able to figure out what that other person's communication style is and adapt to them.
I like it. There is so much to unpack in that, in what Jacqui just said. I think critically, having an awareness of who you are wanting to influence, right? And how they operate. And when I talk about influence, I'm talking about how you want to be able to convey the message or convey who you are or what you're about in an effective way, such that it gets accepted and consumed in the way that you want it to be consumed. It's a very interesting little dance, that whether it is one-on-one or one to many, being able to
Yeah.
as Jacqui mentioned there, read the room, or read the people in the room, and then be able to adapt who you are, not change, but adapt who you are, to make sure that the right version of you is the one that is being seen and heard, and therefore believed.
Yeah, I actually don't think it's adapt who you are. I think it's adapt your communication style.
Yes,
If
sorry.
you're with someone that, that's the quick decision maker that doesn't need the fluff, you're going to drive them crazy if you sit there trying to do the full-on sales pitch. They want the facts, figures, the data. Great. Yep, let's go. We've made a decision. But if you're somebody that's dealing with that profile that needs all of that and you go straight to that point, you're going to come across too aggressive. So being able to understand and quickly understand who your audience is, so that you can then adapt to the appropriate, message that you've got to deliver in the appropriate format. That is what I think performers, go a long way with. And I think performers also understand it's a long game. You can't,
Yes.
it's a long game, right? It's all about relationships. They understand the value of relationships and how building those take time. You'd have to be pretty bloody lucky to pick up the phone, call somebody. Hey, it's Jacqui Barnes from Laing Simmons. Just calling to see if you'd like a free market appraisal because we want to see if you want to sell your house. Who is saying yes to that? No one. No. Maybe in 2005. It's 2020. That's not the conversations we're having these days. And so understanding that that's not the phone call that's going to work anymore, and that you have to be providing value for people to want to accept that phone call. And, that's going to be different for different people in different marketplaces. But understanding that those conversations, you've got to be so lucky it's like winning a lottery ticket, right? You've got to be lucky to stumble across that one person that's ready to do something now. But understanding the effort that you put in today to whatever phone call it is that you're making, that trade-off might be in a year. It might be in 2 years. It might be in 3 years. Your future self will thank you, but value every conversation and piece of communication that you're having, because if you don't, you'll never get anywhere. And the people that you didn't give the time of day to, we did a training session a few weeks ago. We've launched a new training program that you're speaking on actually for us soon. And in our first session, one of the things that this particular trainer spoke about was making sure that anytime you're going to take a buyer's phone call, you need to make sure you have got at least 5 minutes available to speak to that person. Now, they might only want to know 30 seconds worth of information. But if they have picked up the phone to call you and interact with you and ask you a question about a property, give them the time. They're going to be somebody to you eventually. But if you can understand that that's a long game, and that you need the patience to build that relationship and service that person, they'll come back to you in the future, or they'll be willing to accept the communication from you in the future because you've given them the time. And I think that that's something that the industry has probably not shifted enough on, which is understanding that it's a long game. You've got to be patient. And if you just deliver the information and give people the time of day, they will remember you. People remember how you make them feel.
Absolutely, Maya Angelou. Now, there's a couple of things that I want to highlight there, gang. And first one, it's sort of relating to understanding how you need to communicate in order to be understood. So seeking to understand before being understood. I think a lot of people really do balls that up, or they overthink it in some respects when it comes to all their social media, for example, right? And they either overthink it and then get analysis paralysis and don't do it, right? Which is where the majority sit, I would think. But then you've got the ones that do it. So many of them do it without really thinking about who they are delivering to. They're just more concerned about what they are delivering. And as
Mm-hmm.
a result, they're hoping that what they deliver is going to be enough for people to be dazzled and amazed and all the rest of it, right? We make these
Yeah.
assumptions in life as to what other people want. We do it far too
Mm-hmm.
often, whether it is in our relationships, whether it's with our kids, whether it's with the guy down the road, whoever, right? Someone at work. And it's something that happens so often in life that we make assumptions as to um, what people want, or who, or if they need help, or how they need help, or what information they do. They want any information or anything like that. And
Mm-hmm.
so few of us actually take a moment, and this sort of segues me into the second point that you made. So few of us take the moment to ask, right? So
Yeah.
few of us take the moment to ask. And it ties in with what you said about time, because this is a really, really big point, team. Definitely one that you need to be jotting down. We've got to be acutely aware that, yes, money makes the world go round, but time is our only finite commodity that we have. And so when we are trading our time, our time for, for business, or if we're trading our time to be with people, and if it's sociable, or if it's work related, or whatever, or personal development or anything like that, we've got to make sure that that time is being is being invested in the right places. And
Mm.
one of those things, like what Jacqui just mentioned there, she mentioned that from a customer's point of view. If you're picking up the phone, if they're taking the time because they want to speak to you about something, then you need to be prepared to pay that time back in order to cement that relationship, or in order to remotely stand a chance. You need to match that time sort of agreement that they're proposing, shall we say, in the interaction. And you can apply it to anything, right? How many times do we balls this up with our significant others when we think that they want to go do this, that, and the other? And I do this all the fucking time. Where we want them, we think that they want to go do this, that, and the other, and they want to go out for dinner, and they want to do this, and they want to go to the movies, and they want to do, and I'm like always thinking about stuff like that. When half the time I just need to ask my partner, and she'll turn around and go, I can't be fucked with doing anything tonight. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well, we'll just do nothing then. That's okay. That's fine by me. But you know what I mean? Like, we don't take the moment
Yeah.
to ask that would save us so much time. Um,
Yes.
and conversely, if someone is asking of our time, we don't ask to clarify, we don't seek to understand the depth of understanding that they need on certain something, right? So, for example, if
Yeah.
you're managing a team, and they come and ask you they come and they want to ask you a question, then why don't we just say, hey, is this something that you want a really strong understanding on, or is it
Yeah.
something that or is it something you just need a quick answer? Right?
Yeah.
If it's something that needs a bit more understanding, then it is our responsibility, because it's our time, not theirs, right? And this is what I think
Yeah.
it's twisted in workplaces. As leaders, we seem to think that it's their responsibility to be respectful of our time. No, it's our job to make sure that we utilize our time effectively, because it's our fucking time. Um, you know,
Yeah.
um, and I think it all ties in with what you mentioned there about that phone call. Like, if you're going to pick up a phone call, make sure that you're picking up a phone call. And again, I make this mistake with family than I do with more than I do with work. Make sure you pick up the phone call, knowing that you have the space in order to honor that phone call. Um,
Yeah. I
uh,
agree. And if you don't, if you're running into an appointment, say to them, Bob, I'm glad you've called, but I've only got a minute. I'm about to run into an appointment. Can I call you back at 10:30 or in an hour or this afternoon or whatever? And then when you do that, call them back. Make
mm,
sure you're calling back at the time that you've said. Because, I mean, I've been consumer in the industry as well, and it drives me crazy. We went interstate last July, I think it was. July last year. We were looking to buy a property, and I went around to, I think, 5 different local real estate agencies, and no one had an agent in to speak to me about the local marketplace and what was available and all that sort of stuff. Every single person, everyone had an admin or team member that took my name and number, and one person has rung me back. All of that. We're scratching for buyers, and everybody's complaining there's not enough stock. There absolutely is stock. Call your clients. It's not that hard. Pick up the phone. It's the critical piece of real estate information. Pick up the phone. And performers are not afraid of the phone.
Yeah, and high performers aren't afraid to have those interactions. And if you have got a fear, got a fear of that, then it's something that you are going to need to work on, because as we made mention before, you need to have interdependent networks, and you need to have interdependent relationships where there is a mutual value being brought to the interaction, right? And unfortunately, a lot of people have become paralyzed by the ability to be able to communicate as freely as they do on their phones, by doing anything except using the phone for what it was primarily invented for, right? So
exactly. Exactly.
But you can understand that, right? When it's easier, when the barriers to entry are way lower, you can understand why a generation of people have gone, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to.
I actually think what it is, I think there's a few things. I think that what happens with that is there's a lack of training on how to have those conversations. And I think that there is not enough conversation with particularly junior employees that are in those kind of lead generation, prospecting, phone canvassing roles, on understanding that people are going to say stupid stuff to you. And because these team members aren't necessarily getting that preparation, of what can happen in those conversations, and somebody saying, oh, bloody real estate agents, don't call me again, and then that derails them for the next 20 minutes. Performers don't get derailed by those conversations. Performers still have those conversations. People still call them and tell them that they're an idiot and all that sort of stuff. But they hang up from that phone call, they brush it off, and they pick up the phone and they make the next one. And realistically, is that something that's, there might be a few of them that have a natural ability to be able to just do that. I've got one business owner that will tell you, when I've asked him before, how do you maintain that positive mindset in prospecting? He'll tell you, it fuels me for the next one. If somebody calls me a dickhead, I think, right, next one, it's mine. And it fuels him to make the next phone call. But a lot of people don't. I don't think that is something that a lot of people have. I think that they've either worked, and for a long time in the industry and just gotten used to it. But I think probably what others have done is then worked at understanding that person is not actually, it's not you. They're having a bad day. They're, understanding that that's not about you, but having the resilience to be able to hang up the phone and pick up the next call, I think, is what is most important in that. And performers all have that level of resilience to just keep pushing forward every time there's a rejection, because for every yes they get, there's probably been 1,000 no's. It's not, they didn't just become yes. They didn't become high performers overnight. People only ever notice, it's funny, I was having this conversation the other day, and I know I keep referring to the $1 million agent, but when people talk about the $1 million agent, they didn't notice that agent when they were 250 or 500K riders. They noticed them when they wrote $1 million.
Yeah.
They didn't see the years of work that went before that. It wasn't dumb luck. They didn't just happen to luck into $1 million GCI that year. They did the work prior. Just nobody took notice of the work that they were putting in prior. And I think, and all of those performers are disciplined. They follow a plan, they have a process, and they keep it going. And they realize that prospecting or lead generating or making sure their pipeline is nice and meaty, they don't get a listing. And I mean, a lot of people make this mistake early on in their career. They get the listing and they think, yes, and then they focus on that listing. And then they forget that once that listing's sold, the well's dry if they don't continue to build that pipeline over the next however long. And So I think understanding those nuances and how things work, and how they kind of, the pattern rolls on, and you can never not be working on your pipeline. High performers know that, and they maintain that, and they know where their next deal is coming from. They know who their next 10 listings are going to be. They can tell you the last 10 MAs they've gone and done. If you ring any of my high performing agents and say, what's your pipeline like, they'll be able to tell you probably the next 5 addresses and the dates that they're planning to come to market. Even if they don't have the yes yet, they know when they're expecting it. They know what the property is. They can tell you all about it. They have knowledge. And I think that people with knowledge, and when I talk about knowledge, it's not smarts and things. It's understanding. Knowledge is power, right? If you know the answer, you feel more confident. And again, it comes back to the way you carry yourself, having that confidence, being able to answer questions. You've got a buyer coming in here. Oh, where's the closest school to this property? Know the answer. It's St. Joseph's down the road. It's a great school. It's a co-ed school. I believe that they take takes about a year to get in there. Make sure you get kids on the wait list or whatever it might be. Know the information. Where's the best pizza place? Know the answer. It's not that, know your marketplace. And I think that, it doesn't matter how new you are to the industry or how long, you've been in the industry. I think that knowing your marketplace, but not just what things sold for, is important. Knowing who your local businesses are, the coffee shop, where to get the best coffee, where to get the best pizza, all that type of stuff. The best route to get from, whatever the property is to, the CBD, whatever it might be. Know the answer.
And it's a really, really good point that everybody, whether you're in real estate or not, you've got to take note of the fact that confidence is only born through having the knowledge and the awareness of what, not just what you need to know, but what people are likely to ask you. And I don't think that's very difficult to work out. Like I said, irrespective of whether you're in real estate or whether you wanted to run your own business in any way, shape, or form, all you need to do is just engage the human part of you and go, right, well, kind of like what Jacqui said, would I list with them? You need to be able to understand the things that are likely to be asked of you in your pursuit towards a purpose that you want to achieve, right? And yes, you might not get all the questions. You might get a curveball that you're like, well, 1 in 5,000 people are going to ask me that, right? And you get the odd one, and they're always entertaining anyway, keep you on your toes. But for the vast majority of conversations that we have with human beings across the board, you can all but predict the likelihood of question A, B, and C coming out, irrespective of what it is that you're doing, right?
And you know what you said too, though, about that question being asked, you get asked a question you don't know the answer to. It does happen, but there's also nothing wrong. Be honest. You know what? That's a really interesting question. I've never been asked it before. Let me find out the answer, and I'm going to get back to you this afternoon. But get back to them. And that's I think the biggest key with high performers. They get back to people, they follow up, they do the basics consistently and well. And I think consistency is a big thing with performers.
And just doing what you say you're going to do when you're going to do it.
Just follow through.
That's all it is. It's all it is with that. Setting and meeting expectations is that's so important in every facet of your life. I think it's something that we don't pay enough attention to in our personal lives, to be honest. I really don't. I really think we make way too many assumptions in life. And I think that's one of the biggest balls ups from a connection point of view that we constantly make as human beings, is that assumption of what's going on the other side, whether it's work, whether it's mental health, whether it's anything. That word assumption is a prick of a thing. Now, well, I'll tell you, I knew that we were going to go off on a tangent. I love it. It's been a really, really it's been a really good conversation. And when you were talking about, the ability to communicate and connect with people and have that awareness, it reminded me of a picture that was sort of left an indelible mark in my head when I went to a club, when I was clinging on to a youth last year, like clinging on like desperately with fingers. And I went into this club, and it was the most bizarre, because I haven't been out for a long time, and it was one of the most bizarre, surreal moments of my social life in that I went into this club and there was more light coming up from phones than there was coming down from lights. And it was so
Wow.
bizarre that there was these groups of people that were sort of stood looking at each other, but not looking at each other. Their shoulders were pointing at each other, but none of them were actually looking at each other. And you can whinge about the problems that that brings, or you can think, team, about how if you are a good human being, how you can skip the queue when it comes to getting towards your purpose by just
Yeah.
looking up and looking at people and talking to them as opposed to talking through your phone at them. I think it's a
Yeah.
really critical point that. So now I've taken up too much of your time, I'm sure, and we could chat for ages because you're a brilliant person who's got some serious passion for what they do. And for a lot of people that are listening to this, you will have got a strong degree of practicality in terms of the things that you need to become a lot more aware of when it comes to
Mm.
portraying a higher level of being, a higher level of performance, or if you want to be seen as, or if you want to be felt, if you want to be heard as a higher performer than where you are currently, if you want to upscale, upgrade your existence. You will have heard a few golden bits of advice that you really need to pay attention to. Now, Jacqui, from your own personal point of view, we ask this one last question of all of our guests, and um, in your own pursuit of high performance, right? Because we're all on our own trajectories. Um,
Yeah.
what is it that is the one thing that's missing from your game right now in your pursuit?
Oh, it's an interesting question. And I do need to listen to my own advice. I'm full of great advice, but I rarely do I follow my own. I actually rang one of my coaches and said, I was complaining because, a couple of deals I was waiting on weren't coming together. And I was thinking, what is going on? And he said to me, have patience. It's a long game. You already know this. And he's right. I am missing. I am the typical salesperson profile, incredibly impatient.
Mm,
I want the deal. I want the deal. I want the deal. But I also know it takes time, and
mhm.
I know I have to have patience. And I need. That's something that I'm definitely working on. Is having more patience.
Is
It's a long game.
lengthening that fuse.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
It's patience.
and
Yeah.
I think that's actually something that the world needs to work on
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
scale. I think we could all do with a little bit more patience and understanding and what have you. It's interesting whether you like him or not. There is a guy called Charlie Kirk that's very controversial on social media in America, and he's got very specific views about politics and immigration and all these sorts of things. And he does ruffle a lot of feathers. And he sits on outside in universities, angering all these students that think that he's just there to piss people off and be a prick and go viral and whatnot. But there's one thing that he says that I think is absolutely spot on. It's that if we as human beings stop taking the time to communicate with each other, if we just stop talking and become too impatient, then we will end up in a war. We will end up in
Yeah.
civil. We will end up in disaster. We are we
Yeah.
are we are cutting off the thing that makes us inherently human beings.
Yeah.
And it ties in with that patience, the patience thing that you mentioned there, because I'm sure on the end of a couple of deals, you would know as soon as you took half a step back and took a breath, you'd know that you'd be able to very quickly understand the scale of the decision that's on the other side of the table, right? And then you're like, oh yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
So we all do it. We all do it when we have
We,
our own agendas and whatnot.
of course. Of course. We
Yeah,
all do. We
yeah.
absolutely do. And you know what? And I know it. I just have to practice it.
Yes, and we can all be
Yeah.
forgiven at times for forgetting the lessons that we've learned on the journey, because that's what makes us
Yeah.
human after all. Um,
Exactly.
Jacqui Barnes, thank you so much for joining us on the High Performance Human podcast. I really, really appreciate it. Team, there was a lot of real estate related chat there, but it's definitely applicable to all elements of your life. For that, there is no doubt. Jacqui does identify talent on a day-to-day basis. And so if you do want to reach out to her, she's available on all the various platforms and whatnot. She's no hidden flower. She's very much out and about on the socials. So make sure you reach out to her and connect with her and say hello. Jacqui, thank you so much for joining us. And I really appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Team, thank you so much for joining us once again. As always, make sure you stay safe, healthy, happy. Enjoy the rest of your day, whatever it is that you are about to go and do. Take care of yourself and take care of each other. Speak to you soon.